So Cameron, you come from a long line of naval officers. You served and were deployed globally. Talk about how that global experience has informed what you're building at Nominal.
Yeah, I grew up in a really large Navy family. Brother, sister, aunts, uncles, grandparents. I ultimately decided to serve. I spent 484 days underwater on a submarine. I know the specific amount. And when I was doing that, I think I had one major takeaway, which was, we did a lot of operations and exercises with, foreign countries, foreign navies, NATO allies. And then later in the Navy, I had a really unique opportunity to serve in legislative affairs. So I actually worked on Capitol Hill, no uniform, just a suit and tie. And in that job, I got to travel to 34 countries in 2 years on diplomatic missions. And I think one major takeaway, the world is a very fragile place. Being in those closed rooms, closed meetings, like understanding geopolitics, you're hit with, there are bad people out there that want to disrupt the sort of world order. And I think the second thing is that it takes a village. I think understanding how partners and allies play into that picture has been really important, and how that impacts Nominal. We think about what we're building as truly a global challenge and a global opportunity. The ability to produce hardware at speed and at relevance is something that's really important for the entire world.
Yeah. So General Catalyst, we probably see thousands of founders every year, but I knew the first time we met that we wanted to invest, and there's something special about that, because we did appreciate that hardware defense companies had this gigantic gap in how they're building. What was that original moment that crystallized your vision for what you're building at Nominal?
Yeah, I think like any good entrepreneur, I think it was forged in a crucible moment, and so really I think that insight for me actually happened at another General Catalyst company, but when I worked at Anduril. And so, what I experienced at Anduril in sort of the early days, this was when the company was around 100 people, much smaller than it is today. But I was part of the team, sort of a ragtag group of people that were testing, validating, and producing Anduril's counter-UAS system, their anti-drone system. And what that looked like, even with the best software available in 2019, it was early mornings. It was driving out to Apple Valley, California, to the desert. It was sitting in a trailer, and it was trying to bend these old software tools, to your will, to be able to move fast, to iterate quickly, to test and validate. Anduril had some of the smartest engineers in the world, and I'm so grateful that I was able to work there. People who've gone on to build and found really interesting companies now. But that was really my exposure to testing in the frontier. Was still Microsoft Excel, it was PowerPoint, it was PDF, it was data in silos, very manual process. But that wasn't new to me, and I kind of reflected back on, when I was on a submarine, I had the best of 1970s technology, and so I think one theme there is just being familiar with relying on old software for really life or death, mission critical applications, and wanting to change that. And in my journey, I was really fortunate. I worked at another company. Sail Drone, a USV company, an autonomous robotic boat. And I think I experienced there yet another flavor of that challenge, which was how much effort goes into actually demonstrating and experimenting with new defense technology, and frankly, how much data those systems generate, but how little of that data we actually are able to capture. And even more so, like how hard it is to derive insights from that data to actually understand, is my system working?
Yeah. So there's this phrase, for those who aren't familiar with the defense aerospace market, all systems nominal, right? And talk about what that means, and then how that's become again this North Star for your business in terms of helping hardware defense aerospace companies build.
Yeah, we love that. All systems nominal is our slogan. to this day, we still send this little video that says all systems nominal to every new employee at the company. And so what it means, if you're an aerospace mechanical engineer, all systems nominal means everything is satisfactory. It's good to go. All checks have passed. It's green. Thumbs up. You're ready to launch. If you've ever watched a SpaceX launch video, you'll hear them say, all engines nominal, all systems nominal multiple times. And so really, that's powerful for what we're trying to do. I think having a North Star, and for us, that is like we will build products and services in the direction that help our customers develop their hardware systems. And I think having that very bold and appropriately ambiguous sort of North Star has been powerful to allow us to build in that direction. We think that to really move the needle in this space, you have to build a platform. It will be multiple products. They all need to work together. And that's how we want to serve our customers.
Okay. And who are some of these customers that you're working with at Nominal now?
Yeah, it's we're proud to serve over 60 commercial customers. We're working with 4 of the 5 largest traditional defense primes. We work with companies like Anduril. We work with the Corvette racing team. So beyond just defense, and really we are now fully operating in all domains. So we work with UUV submersible companies like Vatten Systems. We work with companies operating on the land like Chariot Defense, building next generation power systems for the Army. Aerial companies like Hermeus, and even in the space companies like Albedo.
And so there's a lot of focus right now on reindustrializing America, right? Rebuilding our industrial base, our manufacturing capability. But I think there's a lot more to that, right? At General Catalyst, we talk about global resilience.
Yeah.
Talk about where you see Nominal headed, vis-a-vis this opportunity.
Yeah, I think this is so much bigger than just America. This is truly a global challenge and a global opportunity. Late last year, we opened our office in London, and we're expanding quickly in the UK and in the EU. And I think you don't have to look far to understand that, with a global land conflict in Europe still persisting in 2026, there's a huge necessity there. And so we've really have seen a huge amount of demand, particularly in defense, globally there. But this is much bigger than just aerospace and defense as well. And so I think we think about reindustrialization, globally is just how can humanity really get to the aspirations in terms of fielding the hardware systems that we all want. This is transportation, next generation energy, mobility, robotic systems. I think the world focused for the last 2 decades on software and SaaS. And we're having a reckoning of that. And Nominal is playing a big part as a core piece of infrastructure and a tool to help people realize those ambitions.
Yeah, that's one of the areas which got us really excited about Nominal, which is that software developers have had all these new tools, all these capabilities, including up to now AI, to help them build cheaper, better, faster. But what about the people building for the physical world, for the hardware? So maybe just talk maybe more about how bad it was before Nominal.
Yeah.
For people building for the physical world to do what they can now do with Nominal.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful always to sort of understand kind of what the status quo is in the industry. And I think really when you're testing these complex hardware systems, sort of what the world looks like is, you run hardware tests. So you have a system under test, a piece of hardware. It generates all of this data, telemetry, sensor data, logs, sometimes images, audio, spits out this massive amount of data. Generally, what that kind of looks like is it's engineers downloading that data locally on their laptop, running some parsing code or analysis code, things like MATLAB or honestly Microsoft Excel, as I mentioned, coming to some individual conclusion, often taking a screenshot of what that result looks like, and then sort of posting that back to some central repository in their organization. It still is, it's engineering in PowerPoint and PDF. And so it really struck us and our team is this almost cognitive dissonance of you look at, these amazing robotics companies or autonomous aircraft or fission plants, and then you kind of pan over to the humans behind those machines and what they have from a tooling perspective, and you sort of flash back in the time machine to 1990, right? And to Nominal, like we think a lot about what we've done in the first 3.5 years of existence is like bringing that industry as quickly as we can from 1990, 2000s into the modern era, just with really good software practices, the data platform we're building. And I think now we're able to peer forward, I think, into the frontier and start to think, what does it look like for Nominal to be a core piece of bringing AI even further into this world of physical AI?
Right. You've done a lot in the last 3.5 years, but let's just go forward 3.5 years. What does Nominal look like in that future?
Yeah, we really started with, you'll hear us talk about testing a lot. And we've really started with hardware testing. I think that's the area where software-defined hardware systems meet reality. It's the first time that they're actually operated in the physical world, and we understand, did it work? What insights can I derive, and how can I iterate and do that again? And so really, I think it's the frontier of this sort of physical AI world. I think you have to solve testing in the same anecdote of software testing has been a huge power into building agentic software tools. I think for us, we're really excited to lean into more and more of that frontier. And I think we think of Nominal as sort of a key system of record in understanding almost like the unit testing level of hardware, which is a core building block into actually being able to build more automation. Things we're already powering right now is the ability for engineers to just prompt and interact with the Nominal platform to perform hardware testing. Things like plot the kinematics of my drone, and Nominal can just do that with some of these LLM interfaces. And I think that's really powerful in changing the constraints of the paradigm. It used to be the case that it would take maybe 50 engineers to test one physical system. Sort of in today's world, we've sort of approached a 1-to-1 ratio. But what does it look like for one engineer to be able to safely test and validate 50 hardware systems, right? And we're seeing that pull from a lot of our customers as they want to move faster and be more and more ambitious.
Yep. One of the things we used to talk a lot about, I think before we actually invested, you guys came up and we had this meeting in our office, and if it was more of like an interview than us pitching you, and you wanted to talk about how do you scale a company over the long run? Like how do you build a compounding company, a generational company? Yeah. And there's a lot of intentionality behind that frankly got us excited. Where did that come from? Like, how do you think about the steps by which you are building a generational company at Nominal?
Yeah, I think I remember that meeting, that dual interview, if you will, vividly. I think one thing that has definitely been a theme, in my life, I think, is that concept of intentionality and of compounding advantage. And so, in some ways, I look at Nominal as this amazing culmination of time spent in service, operating hardware, understanding how the legislative branch works, how amazing companies like Anduril and Applied Intuition and other companies are built. Doing some time in venture, myself at Lux Capital, and then sort of pulling that all together to like take a really big swing at Nominal. But I remember something I think you said, Paul, which was companies are built in these big phases, and I think Nominal, we've had a really successful maybe phase one, right? But these companies have these eras that they go through, and as a founder and certainly as a CEO, the job is to always be thinking, what's the next act and what's the next act? And frankly, even sometimes it's hard for the world or even investors to sometimes really understand the vision of where you're going, and your job is to sort of give people enough data to understand kind of what that journey is and that unique insight that you have. But Paul, I think one thing is like, I'd love to maybe flip the question to you too, which is one thing that made us really excited to work with you is, I think, given your background, you've seen some of the most incredible companies, go public. You've seen them in the later stages. That's really powerful and something we were excited to partner and understand. I think, what have you seen in your career that makes companies truly generational?
Yeah, so it's interesting, if you look across whatever sector, whatever markets, and I had the privilege of working with almost all of the category defining tech companies in the last 25 years. There's two things they have. One is they have the ability to kind of think strategically, like we discussed, kind of in different chapters. Like they have a vision for multiple chapters of that company story evolving, and they're building towards that. At the same time, they have a level of attention to detail and intentionality in the weeds that is almost orthogonal to that visionary setup. And so, not to, show all my cards, but like the way you all talked about the business at Nominal early on, right? The intentionality around product discovery, the intentionality about building the culture, the way you obsessed over the little details around hiring, compensation, product design, is that detail. And then coupled with the ability to articulate and have a compounding vision. Again, we'll see where it goes, but those are the two ingredients you see. It doesn't matter what sector, what markets, that really is the secret sauce.
Yeah, no, I think just building to that too. We sometimes joke inside Nominal. Being in the military, I'm very detail oriented and attention oriented, and I do think that attention to detail, and in some ways you can describe the first couple years of a company as just being really, really ruthless in execution, and that never stops. But I think it's been really fun to be able to increasingly pick my head up as our team grows, and be able to look and peer a little bit further down the horizon with how fast we're growing and things are moving.
Yeah, and talk a bit about the global expansion. I think that's exciting. I think you've done a really good job expanding overseas. Obviously we care a lot about global resilience, and talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, really, this came from a very intentional trip I took now about probably 8 months ago over to the UK, to London, and then into Munich, and just arranged a lot of meetings to speak with prospective customers, both commercially and in the government context as well. And I went over with a hypothesis and was frankly blown away at the level of reception to Nominal. I tell the team now, I think every meeting that we had there has now converted into a real enduring customer relationship, which is really exciting to us. So, came back to the sort of headquarters in LA and sort of, got around the table, spoke to the board a little bit and said, hey, we're going to do this global expansion, and here's why we're so passionate about it. I think, one thing that has been really powerful, you'll hear a lot in particularly Europe right now, a lot of talk about sovereignty and about sort of reshoring and onshoring industrial capacity at these companies. And I actually think Nominal plays really well into that sort of dynamic. We provide best-in-class, software, and we're sort of a strategic partner for companies that are trying to rethink how they produce hardware, do it more quickly. And so as companies, as these nations are sort of thinking through how they modernize, for the next 4 or 5 decades, we want them to think of Nominal as the sort of, Siemens or Dassault level ambition of like, this is the next company, this is the next strategic partner that's going to help me bring, my technology into the future. And I think the last piece, an area that's been really exciting for us is we see a huge demand in, frankly, the ability for the sort of OEMs or manufacturers, the producers of hardware, to have a much better digital relationship with their suppliers. And so a really exciting new area of product development for us is actually, what does it look like for both of those companies to use Nominal and to be able to sort of share all of the telemetry and sensor data and logs and information, metadata about the components and subsystems as they work through this full life cycle. And I think particularly given the sort of dynamics of a European market, there's so much of that custody exchange of components and parts in that ecosystem that's been a particular area where there's been a lot of demand for Nominal.
Yeah, I think it's this mission around building technological industrial sovereignty, right, for each region, right, for America, for Europe, for India, for our allies, is really driving the work we do at GC. I mean, our whole team is called Global Resilience. And I think on that matter, we're incredibly mission aligned on that dimension. But talk about, just how important mission matters, I think, to the team at Nominal. You and I both share a lot of support for the veteran community. There's this global resilience mission, but I do think in this market, mission does drive a lot of the energy.
Yeah, I think it is one of the biggest competitive advantages in a talent market that Nominal has, especially in a world of, I think, a lot of AI hype. It's really fulfilling. I still interview, every person at Nominal, and it'll be a sad day when that isn't scalable anymore. But that day is not today. And I love it. And one of the themes that always comes up in those conversations is when I ask people, why Nominal? What's got your attention? There's always lots of reasons, but almost unilaterally, people mention the mission, and they say, I didn't know that I could work in the frontier of cutting edge data technologies, of software, of how AI is interacting with the physical world, and do it at a place where the mission was clearly mattered so much. We have to live and breathe this, and one of our core values is empower our customers' mission, because they use Nominal in life or death situations. People are using our software for flight testing with human beings involved, right? And so the system has to work. You have to have incredible, 9999 of reliability, and so that really is just like everywhere in our ethos. And I think, particularly, we have, an office in downtown New York, in Manhattan, and it's been really interesting, the number of inbound candidates that kind of come to Nominal saying, I love New York, I want to live there. I didn't realize that there was a company that would allow me to work in a single week with, an aerospace customer, a fusion reactor, a submarine, a medical device robot, and someone building the next generation of water, desalination purification.
Can we just make it really visceral, just the technical challenges of actually showing what happens in these mission critical, high speed, picosecond hardware interchanges? Just walk us through, because to me, one of the things that's always been exciting is just how hard the problem is, the level of engineering quality you need to solve these challenges at these speeds, and just help us understand that a little more.
Yeah, absolutely. We, Jason, our sort of software mastermind, often talks about what Nominal's done is in some ways we've solved, I think it's 11. We've solved 11 incredibly difficult technical problems, some that would maybe constitute a novel product or business in itself, and we've done all of those and been able to link them together. All the credit to our engineering and product and design teams there. But yeah, the scale of data and frequency of telemetry that these systems give off, fusion reactor as an example, we've had to build our product to support picosecond level resolution, and we have on the market the best data visualization capability, sort of hands down, for interpreting the types of data that hardware systems are giving off. And I think one thing that's been really powerful is, we've designed the product in a way that makes it very usable and approachable to this sort of long tail of hardware engineers that particularly are software savvy, they're software proficient, but they want to interact with this tool in a sort of low code, no code interface. It just matches their reality. They're technicians, they're out on the floor, they're at a test site. But also being able to build the product in a way that the most sophisticated software engineers can actually just directly interact with has been something that's really opened up, I think, the market for us.
Got it, cool. At General Catalyst, we think a lot about system-wide transformation, right? How do we think about that at the geopolitical level? How do we have impact with policymakers? How do we have impact around the world with incumbent companies? You talked about the Siemens and the Stellantises of the world, and not just innovation, right? That's kind of the core. And you think the same way as well, right? If I think about the work you do in DC, not just for Nominal, but at the policy level, it matches up with the General Catalyst Institute work we do. Obviously, we talked about Europe. We can talk about India going forward. Just talk about how critical it is to have this global purview, to have this ability to kind of work with multiple stakeholders, public policy partnership, not just innovation, because to us, that is at the core of how we build global resilience.
And that's one of the things that made us so excited to work with GC. I think problems, in most cases, I'd say problems worth solving necessitate public-private partnership. Like the real big problems that will move humanity forward, they happen at the interfaces, they happen at the seams, and I think Nominal as a product really aligns with that. You can take a lot of the federal work we do in trying to help the department, field capability and advance, weapon systems, technology, faster, right, for the warfighter. And that really is like the number of different entities that are present in that sort of symphony of there's the vendors producing the hardware, there's independent test activities and test centers, there's program offices that control the budget and acquisition process. There's the legislative branch that is, trying to think through policy and the appropriations. And so really like you have to get sometimes 5, 6, 7 different people on the same sheet of music. But I think what I have learned over my career is when you that is possible, and when you do that, you can have a really profound impact. And I think for us, this is critical. We have to, the way that the test enterprise has been built, I think, is for these sort of exquisite systems and platforms that take decades to build and test. And the nature of conflict globally, I think, is accelerating, and things are happening much faster. We're learning that in real time, and I think Nominal plays a really important part in being able to field those capabilities reliably at the speed of relevance.
Yeah, and again, just on the government side, you spent time on Capitol Hill. You were, fast attack, submarine officer. It does feel like we finally have a lot of excitement, a lot of momentum, in the Pentagon, in the administration, driving acquisition reform. How excited do you feel about the changes and the momentum that they are making to drive innovation?
I think one thing that's been really exciting for us, I always say, I think, go back even 2, 3, 4 different administrations. I think there's been a lot of talk, a lot of rhetoric around software modernization, acquisition reform. I think I'm seeing a lot of action now, which is really exciting. And then I think particularly, the human beings in a lot of these, positions of influence now understand business. They understand venture, they understand private capital, and they're able to come to the negotiating table with a lot of these companies and sort of architect creative solutions that really benefit both sides. And so we are exploring things like cost sharing models where sort of what you would do in a normal commercial relationship, produce a business value assessment, demonstrate that you can actually save the customer money over time. And if you continue to perform and do that, and the ROI is there, then you get paid for those outcomes. And so that's just a type of engagement model that we really haven't seen before at scale. And so it's exciting to have people that are willing to sort of take some of that risk.
Yeah. I kind of jump around a little bit here since we're winding down, but being on a submarine is sort of like an engineer's, best dream. And, you've got all these crazy systems, granted they're from 1970s, but you're also living, and working inches away from people for hundreds of days. I'm just curious, talk about how that's informed your leadership style, as a CEO and founder from that experience.
Yeah, it's really, I think looking back, it has informed it much more than I would have expected, to be candid. I think Nominal in some ways, building a company from scratch is this incredibly complex system of systems. You have to get product and design and customers and talent and marketing and finance, like all of these independent systems to sort of move in the same direction. And if your vector's off even slightly, right, your cross product, you're wasting valuable resources. And I think that was what I experienced on a submarine. On a submarine, it's a nuclear reactor, there's a steam plant, there's electronics, there's a power plant, but the thing you mentioned that I think is really the key are the humans, are the people. And so I think one thing when you're 484 days underwater and you're having to sort of do the hard work, you need to feel motivated, and you need to frankly understand like how what you're doing plays into a bigger picture. And that's something that I always try to do at Nominal, is help everyone on the team really understand like where we're going and how what they're doing kind of contributes. And then frankly, leading by example is a really, really big one that I lived on the submarine, and I try to embody today at Nominal.
Amazing. Talk about being in LA, not SF, not Texas, not DC. Why LA? What's the history there, and then actually how that helps you set up for global expansion from LA?
Yeah, I really think LA today is kind of the epicenter of a lot of this new hardware and reindustrialization effort. But LA has always had a history here as well. I think companies like Douglas, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, during World War II, LA produced 300,000 airplanes, and now you have the Jet Propulsion Lab and Edwards Air Force Base. It has always been at the frontier, I think, of hardware development, and it's really exciting to see it come back. I think for us, many of our customers that are pushing the frontier in hardware development are within 20 or 30 miles of our headquarters here, which is really powerful. But I think we really do lean into we have an office in Austin. We have an office in downtown New York. We have an office in Washington, D.C., and we now have an office in London as well, and I think there will be more coming. One thing that's key in our industry is the proximity to our customers and being able to go and see them in person and understand their hardware challenges is key, and we'll always do that.
That's wonderful. I have to say, we were on fire.
We honestly were. I thought we would have to cut.
And
I thought we'd have to stop.